Welcome to Opera Lounge at Check the Gate. I am Chen Reiss, and tonight I'm hosting one of the most remarkable personalities in the opera world, Danish Stage Director Kasper Holten. Good evening, Kasper.
Hi.
Hello.
Good to see you.
Great to see you, Kasper. Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Of course, pleasure.
In my introduction, I said that you are a brilliant stage director. And I must add that currently you are also the CEO of the Royal Danish Theatre, which is the home for opera, ballet, drama, and symphonic music in Denmark.
Correct.
So, are you on vacation or are you very busy working from home?
Well, I have to say, I see people saying on social media that they are bored during the current quarantine. I have to say, I feel I've never been more busy than right now, because there's so many questions to think about as a theater. And working from home doesn't make it any easier when you can't just pop in and talk to people. You have to stay in touch with people on video conferencing and think about HR questions and financial questions and customer service and plenty of questions. And of course, the most challenging thing for all of us is planning into the unknown. How can you make scenarios when you don't quite know what you're planning for? So it's quite a busy time, I'd say. I hope there will be a bit of peace and quiet over Easter. But I'm not complaining. There are many, many people in the world who are worse off than us.
That's very true. That's very true. Kasper, I have quite a lot of questions, also from our listeners. So you, at a very young age of 26,
Yes,
were already the artistic director of the Royal Danish Opera, where you directed very successfully the award-winning Copenhagen Ring.
thank you. Yes.
Yes. Now, to direct the Der Ring des Nibelungen, I think for any stage director is a huge project, especially for a very young one who is also the artistic director of the theater. So you have double responsibility. Yeah, it's not just the artistic side, but also the financial side, the marketing. So what made you take a decision to take such a huge project upon yourself at the age of 29 or something like that?
Well, I'll tell you a secret, Ken. Actually, that was my second production of the Ring Cycle, because the first one I did when I was 12 years old in my puppet theater at home in my mum's flat. I was quite the nerd when I was young. I probably still am. I fell in love with opera when I was 9, and when I was age 11 or something, I fell upon Wagner, and the idea that you could combine all this stuff with dragons and giants and adventure with opera was just the perfect match for me. So I did a production of the Ring Cycle with the CD playing on the side on my little puppet theater. So clearly the Ring Cycle has been an obsession of mine for many, many years. I studied it in high school and university. I went to see productions around the world. Yeah, so quite the nerd. In Copenhagen, we had the fantastic situation that we had some of the best Wagnerian singers in the world. They would, Paul Elming, Irene Theorin, Tina Kieberg, Stefan Milling. We had these amazing singers. But the only place where they couldn't sing the Ring Cycle was in Copenhagen. They were doing it at the Met, in Bayreuth, wherever. But in Copenhagen, we only had our beautiful old theater, which was too small to have a Ring Cycle, really. So we hadn't done the Ring for 100 years. And then in 2000, I just become artistic director. And the richest man then in Denmark, Mads McKinney Møller, told us that he would donate an opera house to Denmark.
Wow.
And he not only paid for it, but built the opera house. And when we heard about that, we knew now is the time to do the Ring Cycle. And we had to pick a team for it. And it was just like me going like, me, please pick me. But then again, I was the one who had to pick. So I asked a few people, including our then music director, Michael Schönman, who was, of course, going to conduct it. And he said, of course you should do it. Stig Andersen, who was going to be our Siegfried, said the same thing. Of course you should do it. And, it was like yeah, how could I not do it? So there we are, and we did it, and it opened in 2006, and we did the two first productions in our old theater, and then the Siegfried and Götterdämmerung in our new theater, and then we combined the Ring Cycle there. So that was quite a fairy tale in itself.
And what is the process when you look at that piece? How do you plan? I mean, you start with Rheingold, and 4 seasons later, do you know how you're going to end with Götterdämmerung?
Well, it's a really good question, actually, because I mean, as we know, a person evolves over 4, 5, 6 years, the time it takes to direct a Ring Cycle. So you're not the same when you come out the other side. And how can you exactly know in advance how you're going to end it? And of course, that has implications to how you start it. So I would say what we tried to do was to take a lot of time out the first 2 years to just sit down with my team, discuss, plan, think, not just for the first opera, but for all 4 of them, and try and build the main architecture of the story we wanted to tell. And then what we actually did was we started in the middle. So we started with Valkyrie. Instead of starting from Rheingold and working our way forwards, we thought if we start in the middle and then we work backwards from that and forwards from that, at least that gives us a little bit more a sense of where we want to go in both directions. But of course, there were revisions on the way. And when we did each new production, of course, there were new thoughts, new insights that then fed back into it. So I would say the Valkyrie we finally did in 2006 was not quite the same Valkyrie as we opened in 2003. There were definitely developments. But it's fascinating. It's fascinating to do a project where, you and I, we do so many projects where you work on it, you do it, and then you move on. This one, to see a project that is like going with you for several years of your life, you can really look back at it and see how you have evolved as an artist, how you've learned from it, how people have been taken on a journey, how you yourself have gone on a journey with the piece. It was a really incredible experience.
Yeah, and I assume it was very different than the Ring you did when you were 12 years old.
Well, a little bit. I mean, the Ring I did when I was 12 was mostly famous for the fact that at the end of Valkyrie, I wanted to do this fire effect when Wotan, the god, puts his daughter Brynhilde to sleep on the rock and protects her with a ring of fire. And I had got these little bricks that you can use to light the fire in an actual fireplace. And without my mom knowing, I had put them on stage in a whole circle on aluminium foil and lit them during this home performance, and the whole theater and flat was almost up in flames.
Oh my God.
So that was the end of live fire in the puppet theater. So it was quite a dramatic production. But yes, I must say I used a cassette tape and opened it and took out all this. You remember all the black tape inside it? That was the seaweed for Rheingold for the first scene on the depths of the Rhine. So it was a bit different when we did it in the Royal Theater.
Yes, I'm sure. Kasper, I want to ask you, obviously, about Don Giovanni.
Mm. You did my production in London, Chen.
Yes.
I'm so happy that you did it.
Yes. I had the big honor and the big pleasure of doing your production in London, because I think that the production you did for the Royal Opera House, which then also was around the world in different theaters, I think it's extremely very intelligent and very interesting psychologically and very captivating visually.
Thank you.
And it was really wonderful to be part of that production. And I know that you also wrote and directed a film based on Don Giovanni. So how is it different directing an opera for stage and directing an opera for the screen?
It's really very different. I've done 2 stage productions of Don Giovanni, and we all know it's a difficult opera in any case. I mean, it's such a fascinating and intriguing opera, but always when you have to put a almost mystical or mythological figure like Carmen or Don Giovanni on stage, it will almost always be a letdown compared to people's own imagination or fantasy about him. Although I have to say, with having Marius Christian, I was quite well off with having a quite attractive Don. But I was approached back, I don't know, 12, 13 years ago by 2 Danish film producers who said, wouldn't it be interesting if opera could be made into a film? And of course, I knew these famous examples, the Zeffirelli movies with Domingo, for instance, and I had loved them as a teenager. But there was always something for me that struck me as incompatible between opera and film, which is that opera is so much for me about the live. It's about, when we did Idomeneo together in Vienna in 2014, being there in the Probebühne, in the rehearsal studio with you and seeing you and the other singers, on a Saturday morning and everybody's marking, and suddenly you let go and people are singing into each other's faces and spit is coming out and you can feel the physicality of these emotions. That's what's special about opera. And I always feel I'm almost sorry for the audience that they don't get to be as close as I am to you guys when you know, to experience how this incredible physical expression, how strong it is. And on film, of course, with the playback, and you know, you feel that the physicality is lacking. Even the best opera movies, you feel that, you know, you want to be there live, and you know, if you use playback, you have this feeling that, you know, people get off a chair, you should hear it in the voice, and yeah,
Yes.
all of that was. So we set out to try and say, let's try and make an opera movie that's really like a movie. So we edited it brutally. You know, there's stuff that we cut that you would never cut in a theater, and it's not because it's not gorgeous music, but just to make the film storytelling work. We shot it on location in Budapest. I had another gorgeous Don Giovanni, Christopher Maltman, who was really game with everything we could, you know, how we could explore this character. But the main point for me was we wanted to sing it live. So we recorded the music with the singers and the band, with, you know, but took out the singing. We then had the recording that had been done with them of the orchestra. We put a click track to that, and then they had it fed into their ears on location in Budapest in the middle of the night in a car chase, in the rain, whatever. It's fantastic adventure. But that meant that we could have them sing live under these incredible circumstances, which meant that the physicality, which was so much what I wanted to be there, was hopefully still there. It was a really special experience doing it. But at the end of the day, I you know, my heart belongs to theater. The idea that you meet the audience live, you never know what can happen. It's all that excitement and danger and risk. And of course, in the film, even if we had the live, even if we had the, you know, I knew it was going to be up there. We had done the edit. You know, it's lovely in a way as a director to have that much control, because it takes away the scare of what might happen on first night. You know what's going to happen, but it's also there's something missing in that direct physical contact between the singers and the audience. So it was a fascinating experience, but I also was happy to get back into the theater.
I see. And speaking of first night, so how do you feel on first night? Because I know some stage directors, they're so nervous they can't even sit in the audience. So how are you? Are you happy about it, or is it different from production to production?
You know, when I was younger, I think I still really loved the first night, the excitement of it. And I guess there was like a bit like, oh, this is my moment, and the vanity of it. And as I grow older, I just feel more and more, oh, you're so vulnerable. You worked on a project for maybe 3, 4, 5 years. You've given you know, done your best. You've poured all this emotion into it. You feel so intimately related to it all. And then people sit there and are about to criticize it or judge it, or, you know, and the atmosphere on a first night can be very like people want to make a judgment on something rather than just experience. So can be quite unpleasant. I remember I had a scholarship to go to Bayreuth when I was a young artist from the Danish Wagner Society, and I was there with a lot of other young artists, and some of them said, oh, it's so terrible when they boo the singers, you know, how can they do that? And you know, everybody agreed, and I was like, yeah, that's terrible. And then they said, of course, the director, that's another story, they can be booed. It's like, what? You know, people think, I think sometimes that we enjoy to be booed, you know, and that for a director it's like a mark of honor to get booed. But I can tell you, it's never fun. You go out there, you've poured your heart blood into something, you really wanted to tell people a story, and then when people react with negativity, it can be really crushing. But I always do sit in my first nights. You know why that is? It's simply because my imagination is worse than anything that could actually happen on stage. Anything that could actually go wrong, I could imagine it much worse. So I always say I'd rather be there and know what happened instead of, you know, my imagination running wild backstage. So I do sit in first nights, but I so often wish that I had a joystick or a remote control, or you know, at least they could give us a little red flag we could wave and say that doesn't count. But, you know, that's the point of it. You know, my job is about making other people great on stage. And there's something fantastic about that you have to step back, let go, and trust the people that are on stage, that they will now make it theirs.
Yeah, yeah, that's amazing. Also for us, the singers, it's never nice when the stage director is booed. I mean, even if the singers get wonderful applause, we are part of the production, and
Indeed.
feel it's really, it's very embarrassing for us as well.
And look, I'm not complaining. Of course, people should feel free to boo. In a way, I think it's lovely that people have such strong emotions about opera, you know, that they can go in and boo with a vigor. So I'm not protesting it. I'm just saying, is it nice to walk on stage and be met with boos? No, it's never fun.
Of course not. Of course not. Kasper, the Corona crisis has a huge impact on your theater, on theaters around the world, on individual singers, and a lot is being discussed, especially the financial aspect of it. I'm more interested to hear what you think are going to be the artistic impacts. Will the current affairs filter themselves into the opera stage? Are we going to see stage directors referring to it in their productions?
You know, first of all, I think inevitably it will be there for all of us, for the audience, for the artists, for all of us. It will be, to some extent, a changed world. We will have a changed shared experience, which will certainly mean that we can't tell stories in quite the same way as we did before. Does that mean that we should do now La Bohème in the Corona staging where Mimi dies of Corona instead? No, I think that would be vulgar and pretty superficial. I'm sure there will be productions that try to make a sensationalist short-term kind of impact from saying, you know, oh, this is the Corona production of this and that. But that's rather uninteresting. But does it impact the way we tell stories? Sure. I think the big Teutonic plate shifts, I felt that after 9/11, there was something changed in the way we saw the world. And I certainly think that as artists, although we didn't necessarily put that on stage in a one-to-one way, there was a new fear, a new lack of optimism that snuck its way into the art. But then I think art actually responded with a kind of flamboyancy. There was, after the financial crisis hit in 2008, I think the whole world went into austerity, and actually artists in the opera world started to react by going away from a more austere storytelling and going into a more poetic, re-theatrical you know, so these things do influence the way we look at storytelling, the way that we absorb the way stories are being told, and so on and so forth. But if it would, but whether it should make a kind of like one-to-one impact and be, you know, whether we should do opera productions about Corona, I really doubt that. What is interesting though, that we have on the, I mean, obviously for a theater, it's really frustrating that we have to be closed, and what we're about is getting people together, and we know that there's more need for art now than ever before to inspire people, to give hope, and yet we can't do what we're good at. So we've tried to make a homepage with free material, with streamings and other stuff like many other opera houses. But really fascinating, this week a young artist from our theater has created a new work for video conference about being in quarantine, with musicians playing individually to a click track, with different actors improvising in a video conference, and that being the artistic project. So new projects surely will come out of this. New ways of storytelling will come out of this, but it should be something that is born out of an artistic honesty, curiosity, and necessity. Then it will be worth watching.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's very, very well put. And Kasper, you are a very sought after speaker. And one of the themes that you like to speak about is leading prima donnas. I am really intrigued.
I hope you didn't take it personal.
I am really intrigued to hear, what have you got to say about prima donnas?
Look, how long do we have? This is a topic.
As long as you want.
This is a topic I could probably talk about all night. Look, my point is that we today we are maybe a little bit afraid of the prima donna. You know, we think, oh, a prima donna is someone who's horrible and difficult, and you know, and if you go back to the root of the word, in Italian, it means literally the first lady. And that's because in an opera with a huge ensemble, hundreds of people making music together, you need one person to carry the melody, to be like pulling that whole train into the climax with her voice, with those two little vocal cords. What an enormous pressure on that person, and how much we want that person to be special, to not just be bland, but to be really, to stand out. Now, we live in a time where we have certainly, and in a very good and necessary way, come to understand that there are things and ways to behave that we cannot accept anymore. I would certainly look back and think, as an opera director, 10, 15 years ago, I maybe sometimes let abusive behavior slip in my theater because, oh, that's how it is when you work with the big masters, and you can't expect them to treat people like normal. And I regret that. I think it's good that we've all had a wake-up call and said there is behavior that's just simply not acceptable, and there is ways of abuse that we cannot tolerate. That's good. But we should not let that become a fear of personalities, of prima donnas. I think all organizations need prima donnas. We need people with big personalities. We don't need people who just fit in or who do what management tell them or who are easy to work with. We need people who can think out of the box, whether you are an opera house or you are an engineering company or whatever you create. We need these people who can rethink the world in various ways. And people with different talents, with a special way of seeing the world, they will come with, sometimes a pressure on them. You work in a field where you never know if it's quite good enough because there's no objective scale. That puts a pressure, just like when you walk on the stage, you get feedback, you have your own feeling, you have people you trust, but you can never quite know if it was good enough or whether it was, what's right or wrong. And to work in that field where there's no objective standards, but where it's all subjective, that puts a lot of pressure on all of us. And thus I'm saying we should not condone that people have abusive behavior towards each other, but should we as managements live with people that have big personalities and might challenge us? Should we live with people who are not just doing what management tells them to, but who dare challenge the world? If somebody from the Royal Danish Theatre is watching this, I might regret my words tomorrow. But my point is, we depend on personalities. We should look for prima donnas in the best sense of the word. Maybe not prima donnas who behave like divas, but prima donnas who are extraordinary people. We should not be afraid of those.
Yeah. Amazing. And I have to admit that it was always a pleasure to see you work with prima donnas or primauomos.
Yes, indeed.
It's
it's not only the female prima donnas that you need to think about. There are definitely male prima donnas too.
Yeah, because sometimes you come as a stage director with a very clear idea, and you have very clear ideas. You're also very detailed. You know exactly what you want at every specific moment. No little detail escapes your eye, but it could be that that the singer has a different idea. So how do you inspire them? How do you convince them to go your way?
I think the best part about my job is that I'm not ultimately the one on stage. I'm the one who has to inspire you people who have to do the same in management, that ultimately I can't go and perform Tristan or Romeo. I have to make other people do that and be good at it. That's not necessarily a reason to be soft. Sometimes if someone can't do a role or won't collaborate, you need to be quite tough. But as long as people are on the team, it is my job to find a way to inspire them, to bring them on that journey towards the common goal. How you do that with each individual is very different. That's why you have to spend quite a lot of time on using your antenna and try to pick up. With one person, it's maybe the way you tell the story with words. With another one, you talk a lot about the psychology. With a third one, you are very specific about movement. With the fourth one, it's maybe associations. Have you seen this movie where this and that? People are very different, and it's not my job to make them all work my way. It's my job to plant the seed. I get to pick the seeds. I get to pick the ideas, the direction. But it's then my job to try and inspire everyone to kind of invent that direction themselves and find their way. Because ultimately, if I can make you and all the other singers on a project invest your own baggage, your imagination, your personality in finding a route to that common goal, it's going to be so much more interesting than if I try to make you all into little copies of me, which would ultimately be a pretty boring exercise.
I think it would be an amazing exercise, but, but still. Kasper, my last question for tonight. What's in the future? What's your next project, your next production?
Well, that is a difficult question because sadly my next project is one of the ones that is very much in danger from the current crisis. Every second year we have a big outdoor production of drama with horses and actors and volunteers and music and everything. And this year it was going to be The Hobbit in a big woods north of Copenhagen with 100,000 people watching, 3,600 spectators per night. Huge setup, and I've been working on this for years and years, and we were going to start rehearsals Monday before last, and of course now the whole public sector in Denmark has been sent home, so we are trying to rehearse like this via video conferencing, which you can do to some extent, but ultimately it's hard to study a big battle scene or how you ride on horseback on video conference. So our hope is that Denmark will be reopened and that we will be allowed to perform this summer as planned, because a lot of work and a lot of money is depending on that. But right now I'm a little bit in a limbo where I don't quite know whether I'm going to be ultra busy for the next 7 weeks when we get to go back and do this show, or whether it will all have to go somewhere later and I will have a lot of time on my hands. But the hope is still that we will do The Hobbit this summer. And I do think that if we can get to perform it, for the people of Denmark to come out, be together in the open outdoors, in the lovely summer night, and watch a fairy tale where ultimately evil is defeated by the good forces in the world, I think that would be a very good thing to fight for.
Yes, definitely. It would be very, very meaningful this summer. Indeed. And I wish you that your theater and theaters around the world open very quickly. Kasper, stay healthy.
Thank you, Chen, also you. And so lovely to see you again. It's been too long.
It's been too long. Thank you very much for joining us at Check the Gate. And good luck with everything.
Thank you, you too.
Good night.
Good night.
Bye-bye.